Yo, parish orbits and retrogrades. Welcome back to Rules for Retrogrades. First show in a little over 2 weeks. I was gone literally 2 weeks from Saturday through the following Saturday, and we got back the night of 2 Saturdays later. Holy cow, that was going from Mississippi to Florida. I know a lot of you guys don't like Disneyland or might not like Universal Studios because it's subsidized by the movies. Some of you don't like Harry Potter. Reasonable minds can differ, but we went to both, Universal and Disney World. And wow, Universal was really impressive. It was a great time. I met Mr. Elliot Holst in the flesh, which we never had, even though I do CMask with him every single Friday. That was cool to meet in person. I brought with me Mr. Nick Stumphauser, the new CMask co-host, who comes with me and Steph to different places, lots of different places. So that was nothing new. I also brought Mr. Jay Dyer along, met him. We all met at Elliot's place. In Florida there at Nick's place, I happened to join a stream with another very well-known streamer and YouTuber who shares my middle initial, and his last initials, his first and last, are N and F with mine. It was a productive trip, and I even fit in the second Friday I was gone before I got back, fit in a CMask from Nick's house. So that was on Elliot's channel. So there was technically one show that you got that was Rules for Retrogrades branding in there, and it was the second Friday. If you missed that, go to Elliot's channel. Speaking of missing, boy, I missed a lot of content. The Synod begins in 9 days, the Synod on Synodality. This is the big revolution in the church that I've been telling you about for 2 years before anyone was really talking about it much. It's a big deal. Lots of preparatory work was set up over the last 2 weeks. I'm going to cover all of that over the next 40 minutes or so. And you know what else I missed? Was on September the 22nd, Hobbit Day, International Hobbit Day. That is Frodo and Bilbo Baggins' birthday, a day on which my family celebrates every year. And I intended to be back. We extended the trip a little bit because we were having such a darn good time. And so I wasn't yet back. But I wanted to make the following announcement that for my locals and Subscribe Star supporters, locals and Subscribe Star, I will be beginning a full read-through reading group once a week of the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. We might take a little week or two break in between Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, Return of the King. Might take a little break, take a second to break for a week, maybe two, depending on how the timetable turns out. But that reading group for all locals and Subscribe Star supporters will begin next week. Lord of the Rings. I know a lot about these books. I've done tons of typologies of these books when I used to teach in the classroom. It's an amazing, amazing thing to read through Lord of the Rings as a Roman Catholic. Arguably, it's the greatest Roman Catholic work of fiction in the last 500 years. I think so. I don't even think it's that arguable. Well, I intended to do a stream on September the 22nd, 3 days ago. Missed it because we were about to start traveling back. This is my Universal shirt. I know a lot of you guys hate it, but I like Stranger Things. The cool part is the haunted house in Stranger Things 4. I don't normally wear theme park shirts. I just thought it would be funny.
That's the first time I've ever seen you in a theme park shirt.
It's not really my thing. I get tempted to, because I know a lot of people hate this sort of thing. It's kind of tacky, but I do love Stranger Things. I do love the haunted house, Vecna's haunted house in Stranger Things. And I decided to splurge and buy this just for the first show back. So there you have it. So, starting next week, I will announce to my locals, supporters and Subscribe Star supporters. I'm trying to call you supporters, not patrons. What day it will begin, where we'll probably do an inaugural lecture. I don't think that we'll jump in to have the first chapter of Fellowship read. So maybe we'll gear toward having the first half chapter read. If you haven't read it, then just read the full first chapter for the second meeting. We got a little bit thrown off because the vacation was supposed to be about 12 days. We're there and back again. Hobbit reference. In 2 weeks. We stayed out an extra 2 days. We were having such a good time, weren't we? Wasn't that the greatest vacation, Steph?
That was so fun.
You can probably note I'm refreshed, revived, revitalized, replenished, resuscitated, all kinds of RE words. And I'm just tickled to be back with you, parish orphans and retrogrades. The key takeaway about the Hobbit Day reading, it was supposed to start on 9/22. It bothers me that it's 9/25 that I'm first talking about it, is the following. Become any level of locals or Subscribe Star supporter of this channel today. And, even at the $5 a month level, you will have basically entertainment and a group to go to for most of the rest of the year. I don't mean 2023. I mean freaking, it's going to take us, because we're not going to do huge swaths of reading. I've done that with, quite frankly, and it didn't work out. For me, it was a challenge because I'm a slow reader. So we're going to do small swaths of reading. So for most of the rest of the year between now and September 24, I don't know if it's 9 months or 10 months or whatever, we're going to be reading Lord of the Rings. Maybe it'll only be more like 6 months. I haven't done the math. But the point is, for $5 a month, we will be meeting live on Zoom once a week to discuss a half chapter or a chapter of LOTR. We're going through all 3 books. I know tons of Tolkien lore. I am a Tolkien nerd. I'm not a LARP when it comes to wearing a 3-piece suit in the pool or whatever you're used to at trads. Though my one nerd indulgence, former athlete, I don't go for all the LARPy nerd crap. But I definitely am a Tolkien nerd, and I know a lot of the lore. Not as much as some of my buddies, but I know a lot of the details. I'll tell you this much. Return of the King makes it most explicit, the 3rd installment. But for all 3 Lord of the Rings books, you have a triarchy of who's the main character. Well, you have a priest, prophet, king. Peter Kraft does a great lecture on this. Frodo is the priest. Gandalf is the prophet. Aragorn is the king. They're the 3 main characters. You don't have one. And you see things happening, events, roles, functions, ergonomic duties performed by each of those 3 guys concording with priest and prophet and king. It's such great stuff. It's so exciting. The book really begins on September the 22nd, on Bilbo and Frodo's birthday, with incredibly adventurous stuff. And what I love about it, what tickles my fancy, the child in me, is that on September the 22nd, from the big joint birthday party of Frodo and Bilbo, Bilbo's 11th birthday when he turns 111, Frodo's 33rd birthday, the adventure begins. And in a kind of Halloween-like fashion, I like Halloween. It's another thing reasonable minds can differ about there. Triduum of Halloween. I love the spooky fall crispness in the air. I feel like a little kid again. And it's fall. I know Tolkien felt it too, because he has Frodo and Sam being chased around the still very safe Shire at the beginning of the action here. All throughout September and the first half of October, they're running through the very safe Shire, being pursued by the 9 riders. Not safe. So it's exactly what we love about Halloween, those of us who love it. You're safe, but you get to engage in ghost stories and fun kind of danger amid safety. That's the coolest part about the autumnal September the 22nd beginning of these books. The danger grows throughout Fellowship. The danger grows throughout Two Towers and then Return of the King. The world's basically ending. But it begins with very de minimis. where Frodo and Sam are exposed to danger in a very, very safe, lovely English Shire kind of setting, where they're just kind of camping out at night and trying not to be detected on the Great Eastern Road by day.
Delightful.
It's delightful. So become a subscribe star or a local supporter today, and because we need supporters, I ain't gonna lie, and that's how we'll group you together. And all locals and subscribe star supporters will be welcome to read Fellowship starting next week with us. The funnest books you can ever read. Okay, so we missed Hobbit Day. That was a bummer for Tolkien nerds. But as far as the news goes, let's talk about Bishops Strickland and Schneider. In a letter on August the 2nd, Archbishop Schneider encouraged Bishop Strickland to keep, transmit, and defend the faith of the fathers through his discouragement, hearing more and more between early August and now. There's been more news, of course. This was only reported last week. But there's been more news that would discourage a goodly, heroic bishop like Strickland, Joseph Bishop Strickland. Essentially, he's going to be taken out of commission by Pope Francis. There's been a lot of speculation as to whether he'll go quietly. I mean, he has to. He's a bishop. He knows this. But it's very, very cool that Bishop Schneider supports Bishop Strickland. I'm actually reading from FSSPX News, source here. In a letter addressed to Joseph Strickland, Bishop of the Diocese of Tyler, Texas, Athanasius Schneider, Auxiliary Bishop, not Archbishop, I said Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of Astana, Kazakhstan, encourages the courageous American bishop in his confession of the Catholic faith and in the preservation of the flock entrusted to him. Now, the letter was dated August the 2nd, but its existence was only reported on late last week. He, Schneider, expresses his gratitude to Strickland, both of whom are holy bishops. I'm going to call them by their last names because they both begin with S. For his, quote, intrepid dedication to uncompromisingly keep, transmit, defend the Catholic faith. He applies to him the words of St. Basil the Great. The one charge which is now sure to secure severe punishment is the careful keeping of the traditions of the fathers. Quoting the same saint again, Basil the Great is based Basil the Great. He applies his words to the current situation. The doctrines of true religion are overthrown. The laws of the church are in confusion. The ambition of men who have no fear of God rushes into high posts in the church, and the exalted office is now publicly known as the prize of impiety. This comes from, he's talking about the Arian crisis. And we have a situation in the church now far worse than the Arian crisis. All of today's news, Strickland and Schneider, Father Altman and Cardinal Mueller, Francis presenting at the Clinton Foundation, the African Bishops' Orthodoxy, Cardinal Fernandez and his pervy books. He's now the new DDF at this point.
Because that makes sense.
Because that makes so much sense. All of it involves the synod upcoming in 9 days. All of it looms in the shadow of the mountain. Let's use a Tolkienian phrase. The shadow of the mountain, which, glowers the volcano of the Synod on Synodality in the distance. And there's some real specific stuff that we're going to get to with some of the other stories. But this is worse. It's the culmination of Francis's pontificate, and it is worse. Any day of the week I'll defend this opinion than the Arian crisis. The exalted office is now publicly known as the prize of impiety. That's Basil the Great. Think of Cardinal Burke being demoted during the Synod on the Family in between 2014 and 2015. The double Synod on the Family. Think of Cardinal Mueller being demoted. A lot of people thought he was the fifth Beatle, the fifth Dubia cardinal. He helped to pen that book that got Cardinal Burke in trouble for distributing, keeping the faith of Christ, living in the truth of Christ, about why you can't have Catholic divorce or divorcees receiving communion. That those two guys enraged Francis, and Francis took them both out. Right? He also demoted Cardinal Sarah, however you say it. And he elevated Tucho Fernandez, we're going to talk about him, to an exalted office, publicly known as the prize of impiety. The result is that the worse a man blasphemes, the fitter people think him to be a bishop, says based Basil the Great. Clerical dignity is a thing of the past, says based Basil the Great. There is complete lack of men shepherding the Lord's flock with knowledge. Faith is uncertain. The mouths of true believers are dumb, while every blasphemous tongue wags free. Holy things are trodden underfoot. Schneider adds that the words of St. Basil in his letter to Pope Damasus, in which he asks for the help and effective intervention of the Pope, are entirely applicable to our current situation. The wisdom of the world wins the highest prizes in the church and has rejected the glory of the cross. Shepherds are banished, and in their place are introduced grievous wolves hurrying the flock of Christ. But, continues Schneider, unlike St. Basil, who addressed Pope Damasus, you don't have, goodly Bishop Strickland, the real chance to address Pope Francis in order that he may help you to keep zealously the holy traditions of the past. On the contrary, the Holy See put you now under scrutiny and threatens you with intimidations and deprivation of your episcopal care of your flock in Tyler. For one reason only, this is the case. Like St. Basil, St. Athanasius, and many other confessor bishops in history are keeping the traditions of the fathers. Only because you're not silencing the truth. Only because you're not behaving like now a few bishops of our day who, using the words of St. Gregory Nazianzus, are serving the times and the demands of the masses, leaving their boat to the wind, which happens to blow at the moment. A wind which blows at the behest of sexual depravity. A revolution in Catholic moral theology at the level of sex. To encourage his correspondent, the bishop continues, however, dear Bishop Strickland, you have the happiness that all the popes of the past, all the courageous confessor bishops of the past, all the Catholic martyrs, in the words of Teresa Avila, were resolved to undergo 1,000 deaths for any one article of the creed, to support and encourage you. Now, as the synod is 9 days away, it's total catastrophe. That's not social media madness or exaggeration. I would be the middling voice to tell you guys, one, this is not, criticism of this is not just for people that believe Francis isn't Pope. We're going to talk about Father Altman in a little bit. He's probably Pope. Maybe he's not, but he's probably Pope. Okay? And criticism of Francis's synodal behavior should not be restricted to the Synod on Synodality, which begins next week, begins next Wednesday. It should be noted that Francis has used the Synod and synodalism and synodality throughout the entire course of his pontificate, beginning the second year of his pontificate. In 2014, in the extraordinary Synod on the Family, I watched that very closely, though I didn't do 3 times a week shows at that point. I watched it very closely. I read the work of 1 Peter 5 at that time. Thank you to Steve Skojek. Good work. And I was fascinated. At the time, I was working in a law office as a first-year attorney. I was fascinated. Every morning, I'd be getting ready, and I'd be scrolling articles on 1 Peter 5 on what the hell was going on in October of 2014. Do not make the mistake, as a lot of the neophytes to the church between 2014 and now have made, of assuming this is the coming out party of Francis, the synodal coming out party of Francis. The exhortation, post-synodal exhortation that Francis issues after this October gathering will not be the first post-synodal revolution. We had the 2014 Extraordinary Family Synod, the 2015 Ordinary Family Synod. We're going to talk about lots of the skullduggery that happened there when we talk about the African bishops who saved the day in 2014 and 2015. And it was all exactly what Francis is doing now. I think the mask is off a little bit more. I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that's wrong to say. The mask is definitely off a little bit more. So the doctrine that's brought forth will be a little bit worse. But Francis has used synods the way that they were intended at Vatican II to bring the winds of revolution into the church. Guess what? Guess what? This is nothing new. It's going to be worse by a distinction of degree, but it's nothing new. Bishop Schneider is quoting St. Basil the Great to say that this is nothing new. Schneider, I learned who Schneider was during the preparatory phase of the 2014 Synod. He was heroic at 2014. Burke was heroic in 2014, 2015. Mueller was somewhat less, but was one of the heroes of those first synods where we were really learning who Francis is. I learned who the really heroic members of the African episcopate and cardinalate were in 2014, 2015. They really saved the day against the Casparites. Well, they saved the day as much as they could. And so Schneider is again quoting St. Basil to say, this is worse than the Arian crisis. It started being worse 9 Octobers ago. Can you believe that's 9 years ago?
That's crazy.
I would get up, I'd be brushing my teeth, whatever, getting cleaned up, getting ready to go to my 10 or 11 hour law job day. I hated that. Before I went back to teaching. And I was like, I don't work in the faith. I'm interested in the faith. Reading every morning. What's up? What's going on with this crazy synod, with this crazy pope? And all of these men, Basil the Great says, get demoted for being faithful. And their enemies, the faithless, are promoted for being faithless. Well, that was happening under Damasus, who's a saint. Damasus is a saint, I believe. It would double check me, but Pope Damasus is a saint. He wasn't the guy, he wasn't the architect of Arianism. Francis is the architect of the revolution in the church, or at least the point man among the architects. Okay, so that letter was written on August the 2nd, only reported about 9 days ago. And it's something that I missed. What's the takeaway from that story? Synodal revolution is 9 years old. Come October, it's 9 years old. In the Francis pontificate. I'm not saying nothing fishy happened in synods under JP2, because I've learned recently, I think some might have, but it's not a show on that. And JP2 didn't use synods the way Francis has. Francis, from the jump, a year and a half into his pontificate, held his first synod in October 2014, and it was bad. Remember that? Does anyone remember that? See, a lot of people that I'm friends with that aren't like SSPX or Beneplenis are like, oh, everyone's inflating this. They're making too big a deal out of this. It's ridiculous. No, they're not. They're not. I'm not saying Francis isn't Pope. I don't know. He probably is Pope. But the people that tend to be on the other side, saying Francis isn't Pope, tend to be right about how big a deal this is. In the Relatio, that's the midterm report of 2014, it said we need to focus on the positive aspects of Father James Martin type relationships. You know what I'm saying? Okay? That was the midterm report. And then after that, the African bishops freaked out, as they should have, because they're heroes. And for the rest of the 2014 Extraordinary Synod, they were shifting the shells so that people couldn't tell. They were like, I thought the church was ready for this revolution. Nope. The Africans and the Asians really saved that one, together with Burke and Mueller and Brandmuller. Meisner, rest in peace. And Cardinal Carlo Cafara, the fourth Dubia Cardinal, rest in peace. Those guys saved it. Then it came out in 2015 again, and they changed the rule, and they made it where the media couldn't report freely. We're going to talk about how that's happening this time. Francis learned his lesson in the first half of the 2014 Synod. People freak out. Conservatives are still alive. We're watching. We will resist Sauron. There are forces in the West, as Tolkien writes, who still will resist. That's what he learned that first week and a half of the 2014 Extraordinary Synod. And it's brought to bear here by Strickland and Schneider's correspondence. He learned, oh, shit. Francis thought the church was ready for this. Sex revolution. Divorce revolution. Revolution below the waist. Nope. The conservatives are strong in America. That's why he hates us. Whew. Y'all take a super chat question. You want to go right now?
Oh, sure. This is from JD. He says, Tim, what are your thoughts on the permanent diaconate? Is controversy over this in trad circles well grounded? What would you tell married men who are discerning this ministry to consider?
I generally tell people, look, stay away. Or being ordained. We believe in the Latin Rite is for guys that have the time. With a family, you shouldn't have the time. I mean, I know it's a holier thing than going and playing billiards every night, but generally speaking, this is the belief. Holy orders are for those who have exclusive time focus for the flock. I've never believed in it. I don't think it's as big a deal as maybe some of the other trads do, but I don't think they're wrong. I think the inclination, the impulse, the itch is correct. And I think we're seeing the way that they want to ordain the broads, and probably will ordain the broads at this synod. I think we're seeing the way that third order can be manipulated. Well, they're already married people. Why not married women? I'm not saying it's a direct causal relationship. I'm saying it's a highly correlatory relationship, and I think this was the object in mind. It's not my strong issue, I don't think the permanent diaconate is ipso facto a catastrophe, but I do think it was done with a nefarious intent. Now, Father Altman, Cardinal Mueller. Who should we take first? Let's go Altman. Let's go Altman first. Okay. Oh, a man. Okay, so Father Altman. Let's read his. So, on September the 13th, again, a couple days into my vacation, he tweeted, Jorge Bergoglio is not the Pope. Full stop. And this created a scare. I think it was in some line for some ride at Universal. We did Universal first, then Disneyland. I know you guys hate it. We were in some line, and I think I saw this, and I was like,
I hate it.
I hate it. And I hate the tweet. I hate the false certitude. I've admonished, and I'm not saying I'm a priest. I'm not a bishop. I'm not even a deacon. But I've admonished with this bully pulpit epistemic humility, and there's none to the claim Jorge Bergoglio is not the Pope. Well, how do you know? I mean, look, when the Pope's planners are like, I'm certain he's the Pope. I don't know how you know that either. How are you certain? He's fishy. He's the fishiest Pope we've ever had. He's fishier than all 30 plus of the anti-popes, if you judge him by his doctrine and you judge him by his friends. So how do you know he's the Pope? Repeat, he's fishier as a doctrinal chief of the doctrinal chief, and he's fishier judging a man by his friends, because birds of a feather flock together, than any of the 30 anti-popes in the history of the church. Now, that doesn't mean QED, he's an anti-pope. But it doesn't mean QED, he's not an anti-pope. We just can't tell, we the faithful. We cannot tell. Jorge Bergoglio is not the Pope. How do you know, man? I mean, if you really have the receipts, bring them. What this channel has attempted to stand for a few things, and that's one of them. If you make a big claim, the way I do from time to time, I've made some big claims here. Pretty much started the Patriarchy revival, just saying, 3 years ago. I made some big claims, but I bring the receipts, by Jove. Damn well bring the receipts. And if you have the receipts, but you don't bring them, then shame on you. So that should have been a tweet thread. Here's how I know what I know. Here's how I know what I know.
While you're looking that up, we have some super chats in here that some supporters saying that they thought that Sharon saying she thought that Father Altman laid out quite a legal case for anti-pope.
Yeah, I think I know what you're. Look, I'm trying to say this delicately. How do I do it? Cases of law are decided 51-49 a lot of times. A strong case is like 65-35. I mean, if you're kind of quantifying the evidence. A strong case is 65-35. That means that even like a weak case can make 35% evidentiary showing or something like that. And I don't worry exactly how I'm quantifying the evidence. No cases are like 100-0. There will always be an attorney on the other side, a devil's advocate, pushing back with evidence and smart, shifty arguments, okay? So a lot of you guys here, oh man, he made quite the case. And all you're saying is he said there are reasons why Francis might be anti-pope. Yeah, I know. I know them quite well. I say there are 4 campaign paths by which you could by which eventually we might learn Francis was an anti-pope. 4 separate paths. For a lot of claims, there's only one, and it pans out. There are 4 separate ones. If this one's closed, you could go to path 2. If 2 is closed, you could go to 3. If 3 is closed, you could go to 4. That doesn't mean it's a done deal. You only know when you know. Okay? You only know when you know. And the only time we'll know is when the cardinals confirm it. They say, this guy was an anti-pope. And guess what? Here's the reason. Listen to me now. I want you to hear me. Here's why it's so absurd to speak with utter surety the way that Father Altman has. Because the ontology of our ecclesiology as Roman Catholics, the ontology of our ecclesiology makes for a cosmology whereby if the cardinals declare, yeah, here's the evidence, we adduce it such and thus, he was an anti-pope, then he was an anti-pope with retroactive efficacy. But with the same fact pattern, if they don't declare it ever, if this weak group of cardinals doesn't get together and declare it, even with the same evidence, the cosmology that is the product of our ontology times our ecclesiology, then he wasn't one. And you're like, no, that's not how our ecclesiology works. If it's true, they'll announce it. No, some aspect of ecclesiology is left to prudence, the prudence of the men in the seats, bishops and cardinals. And if they don't ever have the balls to declare in 5 years or 10 years or whenever Francis dies that he was an anti-pope, then he wasn't. And if it doesn't happen almost right away, then it probably won't happen. I'm not saying it couldn't happen 70 years later. But it's pretty much got to be this group of guys say that Francis was wrong. And if they don't get together and sack up and do it, then he wasn't. That's what I never hear you guys with certitude on that side of things ever articulate. Now, I never hear the Pope splainers articulate the fact that, yeah, he's the most fishy Pope we've ever had, bar none, judging him by doctrine, bar none. And the Sankt Gallen agenda and 3 other paths to possible anti-Pope is quite compelling. The biggest doubt in my mind is not whether or not there's a case that he's anti-Pope, it's whether or not it will be made by the cardinals. No one, and I mean no one, talks about this. Ever. Altman doesn't talk about this. Okay? For him, ontologically speaking, to be retroactively removed from being a pope, that's what an anti-pope is. It's chronological retroactivity. It's the removal of office by chronological retroactivity. You have to have a quorum of cardinals that have the sack to make the pronouncement. And that would be really strange in the modern world, the way the modern media works. New York Times, LA Times, London Examiner. The way they work, there's going to be a lot of pressure for these center-left to far-left guys to get together and make even the right call. Let's presume that there's the evidence to de-pope Francis sometime in the future. If they don't do it, then it shall not be done. I don't subscribe to the late sententiae explanation of, oh, he depoped himself by his own words. There's no juridical action that needs to correspond with it subsequently. I don't buy that. Maybe I'm wrong there too, but I don't think I am. Maybe I'm wrong there too. This is an unprecedented situation. Deal with it. Father Altman, you've done lots of admirable stuff. You play the ball as it lies. Deal with the facts as they are. We do not know with certitude, which would be much more comfortable to know, by the way. We do not know with certitude what the F the deal is with this guy, with this Pope. Why can't...
Probably never will. We probably won't be alive to see what the ruling will be on this Pope.
It's possible we never will. And it's possible he'll just be called Pope for the reasons I just enumerated. But no, I think if he's going to get anti-poped, it'll happen during our lives.
You think so?
That's what I was saying, yeah. I think it pretty much has to happen soon.
I hope so.
What you're always saying, because you watch the rape programming or whatever, the Forensic Files, Cold Case Files. If you don't find a kidnapped person within 48 hours, the case goes cold. That's how it is, I think, with anti-pope.
Yeah.
You have the Avignon Papacy, the Great Western Schism. Study that history. But that's not quite... So that it could get turned around 70 years later. I don't think it will with Francis. It could be. And then Steph would be right. A third option. But I think it'll happen swiftly if it's going to happen. But just play the ball as it lies. Deal with the facts as they are. We can't know right now. And that's more uncomfortable than anything. You want to be based in red pill and cutting edge? Then just say, we do not know for certain what in the hell Francis is. What in the hell kind of force is beneath him? Now, he's friends with the WEF. He's friends with the Clinton Foundation. We need to get to that story. He's friends with all the wrong sorts. He's friends with Jeffrey Sachs, with Ban Ki-moon of the UN, with Soros plants all over the world. He's friends with the population control people. He's friends with Emma Bonino. He seems to hate the human race. But that doesn't mean we know he's not Pope. Just, what was it, yesterday? So that was Altman's tweet. Lacked altogether what I'm always preaching. Please, epistemic certitude. Jorge Bergoglio is not the Pope on 9/13. That was a face palm for me. Then just today, he did this homily, the great millstone, throw Bergoglio into the deep blue sea. Now, I think Bergoglio is I think Pope Francis has got serious troubles, if I had to judge. I mean, he has been the ultimate stumbling block in the history of the Roman Catholic Church. In over 2,000 years, he has been the ultimate stumbling block. This guy has problems. I mean, problems with this. I don't think I lack epistemic humility by saying that. This guy has brought so many into doubt, and he's confirmed so many in their error. So many faithful have been brought to doubt. So many of the faithless have been confirmed in their mortal sin by this guy. And he's doing everything he can to work with the enemies of the church against the faithful in the church. But that doesn't mean we say throw him into the deep blue sea. That's what Altman tweeted 7 hours ago. He retweeted it. Throw Bergoglio into the deep blue sea.
Today, we are going to consider Jesus' teaching on the great millstone as it applies to Jorge Bergoglio, and how the best... People get mad at me because they say I'm just angry all the time. But the best thing we could do would be to tie the great millstone around Jorge Bergoglio's neck and throw him into the deep blue Mediterranean Sea. So before we address this great millstone applied...
I mean, like, that's murder? Even if he's an anti-pope, I'm not getting where Father Altman's coming off here. Yes, I've been really, really angry with this guy pretty much every week. Times 52, times 10-year pontificate, whatever it is. Totally. But like, Jesus said it would be better for, he doesn't name the subject of the action, of the predicate. He just says it would be better to, have never been born, and a millstone will be tied around the necks of stumbling blocks. He doesn't say that the faithful should do it, particularly if one of those stumbling blocks turns out to be number 266, the Pope, or anti-Pope number 30, whatever. We're not charged with the agency of that, like, murder. So I've liked a lot of things Father Altman said in the past. This is just murder. Even if he's right about Francis being an anti-pope, which I don't think there's greater than 50-50 chance that he is, but even if he is, you can't, like, murder anti-popes singly as a single member of the body politic, not acting with the prerogative of the state, the way, like, the Holy Roman Emperor could do this to an anti-pope. Not just me. I'm just a guy. And so are you guys. You're all just guys. You can't go do it. That's really odd. Now, Cardinal Mueller, who's been a kind of low-grade hero throughout the entire 10-year pontificate of Francis, throughout the entire 9-year synodal period of Francis. He didn't have a synod the first year and a half. On September the 12th, he said, the synod is the great hour of manipulation. Now, here's where things get interesting. Mueller is concerned because he was there. He's going to be a participant in this one, too, even though he's no longer CDF, by the way. He will be a participant in this one. He was there at the... Let me show you. He was there at 2014, 2015. He was there in 2019 at the Amazonian Synod when they were supposed to do Viri Probati and women deacons back then, but COVID seemed to throw them off. He says, this is the great hour of manipulation, and I'm very concerned that manipulation will entail journalists having access only to their information. And this is what they've announced. The synod's 9 days away, parish orphans of retrogrades, and the journalists will have access only to the information that they themselves provide. That's a weird phraseology. Okay, that's very odd, I would say. But, and I don't know exactly what it means, but they're going to be shutting journalists out the way they started doing in that ordinary family synod, the second one in October 2015. On Tuesday, Cardinal Mueller gave a frank interview to Spanish Catholic news website Info Vaticana. This was Tuesday the 12th, in which he has expressed his grave concern about multiple aspects of the upcoming Synod Assembly on Synodality and the current state of the Church. The interview is done in writing as the cardinal is in Poland. And it's followed by the announcement by the Vatican that the upcoming Vatican Assembly, the Synodal Assembly, journalists will only have access to the information they themselves provide. Listen to this. According to a report by Le Besma of La Croix, Pope Francis apparently is considering imposing pontifical secrecy on the upcoming Synod of Bishops on synodality, not simply on opinions and votes, which is a typical object for secrecy imposed by the pontiff. That was past practice. But on all issues addressed during synod discussions, so they can say, let's do the most unexpected revolutionary measure, and no one will know who voted for it. Cardinal Mueller, former prefect of the CDF, will be among 400 participants in the upcoming Synod on Synodality. Asked in the interview how he would be approaching the final phase of the Synod on Synodality, Mueller replied, "I pray that all this will be a blessing and not a harm to the church. I'm also committed to theological clarity so that a church gathered around Christ doesn't become a political dance around the golden calf of the agnostic spirit of the age." Asked how he received the news of his appointment as a synod participant, he replied, "I want to do the best I can for the good of the church, for which I've dedicated all my life, thought, and work up to now." He's making reference to the other synods he was at. He was CDF prefect for some of them, number 2 doctrinal chief in the church for some of them, and he knows what Francis is capable of. He thinks Francis is Pope, for what it's worth, you Altmanites, Altmanics, and yet he still thinks that Francis is bad. He knows there will be manipulation. It will be spearheaded by Francis. They're trying to work a revolution in moral theology. That I'm saying to the other side, the Pope-splainers. I'm in the middle saying he's probably Pope, but this is probably the worst thing that's ever happened to the church. And that's why he's saying, I've worked all my life, I've dedicated my life, thought, and work to saving the church in the way that I can. Above all, I would like to say, in view of the many disappointments of the young people in Lisbon, a church that does not believe in Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, is no longer the church of Jesus Christ. Why do you think, my people, that everyone who's faithful is talking this way? Cardinal Burke talking this way. Bishop Strickland talking this way. Bishop Schneider talking this way. Cardinal Mueller talking this way. The African bishops talking this way. They see what's around the corner. It's only 9 days around the corner at this point. It's been prepped. It's been queued up. The actors are all in their places. The props are there. The lines have been recited well. They've had dress rehearsal for this in the Amazon Synod of 2019, where they made an attachment to the final, not the Instrumentum Laboris, the final program, the final working document. They said, they attached to it something that said women should probably be deacons. But they said, we're going to punt on this for now. So it's all been queued up for this moment 4 years later. From October of 2019, it was the time when I was beginning this show and this channel, to now, in those past 4 years, they've been preparing, striving, working, laboring for this revolutionary moment. And it's about to come out, and I will be vindicated. I will be vindicated. And it's not the kind of vindication you want, but for those of you who are like, no, Francis is good, you probably weren't. A lot of these are young guys that got sick of the counter-revolutionary talk of SSPX types who are like, no, Francis is good. All that's exaggerated. No. You weren't around in 2014 and 2015, in 2016's April, when the post-synodal apostolic exhortation after those two synods, 14, 15, were exactly what we thought it would be. Giving communion to the divorced and civilly remarried. No one even talks about that. Francis has already breached doctrine. It's even a dogma, a communion and confession dogma, that you can't give communion to the unrepentant mortal sinners. And he did that already. So this is not theoretical. They're taking it further. It's going to be worse. It's going to be worse. I promise you it's going to be worse, and
Everybody
it was bad
put on
then.
a brave face. It's gonna get worse.
Yes. Put on a brave face. It's going to be bad. It's going to be awful. Just quit lying. Quit lying by saying, like Father Altman, you know he's not Pope. Quit lying by saying you know that he's not going to bring revolution to the church. He already has. And even if he winds up being an anti-Pope, you didn't know it. Knowledge requires three things. It's justified, true belief. It might end up being true. It might be your belief, but you can't justify it now until the cardinals say it later. There's another good tweet by Altman here that cues up the other thing. That cues up the Francis's interaction with the Clinton Foundation types. At the Clinton Global Initiative meeting, Francis urged global action to combat climate change. This is the one thing, this is an evil, I put it in scare quotes, that he does want to combat. All these moral evils in the church, particularly related to men and women's private parts, divorce, remarriage, forms of sex which are not licit. He wants to combat those who want to combat evil. But when it comes to this so-called evil of climate change, he wants to combat that evil. If it were real evil, then he'd be an opponent of the forces of evil. The problem is climate change is not an actual moral evil. I don't even think it's an actual logistical evil. Whether he is or he is not Pope, he's part of a cabal, people. That I'm certified about. I'm certain. Whether or not Francis is or is not Pope, he's part of the population control climate change cabal. Jeffrey Sachs is one of his best friends. Tucho Fernandez, ghost author of Laudato Si. Emma Bonino performed more abortions in Italy than anyone. He called her a great woman. Ban Ki-moon at the UN. His many, many, many Soros plant friends that he hung with at the Clinton Foundation, they are part of a cabal. They are friends with WEF, where he also attended WEF this year. Those are his homies. He's part of a cabal. Homies is a very cheery way of putting it. A cabal of plotters. That's a fact. Here's Altman's tweet about that yesterday. Funny late night joke on Fox's Gutfeld show. They're laughing at us, non-Catholics. This week, Pope Francis urged global action to combat climate change at the Clinton Global Initiative meeting. Gutfeld said, this from the Vatican that sends black smoke into the air for weeks to tell us they haven't picked a pope yet. It's not a funny joke, but the point is everyone's laughing at us. The point is, whether or not Francis is Pope or anti-Pope, I think the former, you might think the latter. He's part of a cabal. Tell the Pope-splainers that. Show the receipts. Holy cow. All right. There's so much. You go away for 2 little weeks, and this is what you have. Now, the African bishops I've tried to demonstrate here in 2014 saved the Extraordinary Synod from the perspective of the Father James Martin sin. From that perspective, they saved it because at the midterm report, the Relatio, where it said we have to begin acknowledging as a church the positive aspects of those types of relationships, they went berserk. Cardinal Sarah and his friends, amazing guys, they went berserk. They're like, not on my watch, not in my backyard, take it to the bathhouse. And they had to, and Francis, for the second half of the 2014 synod and for all of the 2015 synod, they had to do kabuki theater. They had to juggle all these balls. At the 2015 synod, to thwart the Africans from reporting, they had to literally change the rules, sometimes multiple times per day. That's the explanation of the media circus, where even left journalists are like, I'm being shut out. I can't get info. What do I do? Remember some of the back and forths Diane Montagna had in 2015? Church Militant had some really good ones in 2015. They were shutting everyone out, freezing them out. That was because the African bishops saved the day. Now, the delegates to this synod on synodality, they say they're going to give no room for distraction, says Archbishop Andrew Fuanya Nikea of Cameroon. No distraction. Now, this is kind of morally neutral. They're not to give room for distractions during the meeting scheduled to begin on October the 4th. The Catholic bishop in Cameroon has told ACI Africa. I'm reading from an ACI Africa site. In September 23rd interview, Andrew Nikea Fuyanya of Bamenda Archdiocese in Cameroon said deliberations during the synod that Pope Francis extended to 24, remember it was supposed to end this October, he extended another one because it was going slow at the beginning, will focus on the Instrumentum Laboris, the working document. We're not going to allow ourselves to be distracted by the social media antics. There will be no room for distraction. Okay, do you mean this from a left or a right perspective? The social media distraction will follow upon the clown world, clown antics by the Father James Martin types, by the Communion for Divorced Remarrieds types, by the let's have girls in the church, screwing up the church the way girls in public life screwed up the world over the last 100 years. We are not going to allow ourselves to be distracted by the social media antics. There will be no room for distraction. The aim of the synod is to reflect on the church we have and how we want it to be and not to change the doctrine of the church. The Cameroonian Catholic Archbishop, who was appointed member of the Ordinary Council of the Synod by Francis, highlighted some of the issues to be discussed, saying, we are going to reflect on the problem of LMNOP in families and polygamy in marriage, but it's not about changing the teachings of the church. There's already an Instrumentum Laboris we are working on. He's the president of the National Episcopal Conference of Cameroon, said also, we've dedicated 3 years of effort to prepare for this event through questionnaires and a mini African synod that was held in Ethiopia. This does not sound promising. This doesn't sound like you have the same goodly men of clear mind in place as you did in 2014, 9 years ago. I can't believe that was 9 years ago.
Wow.
We're going to allow ourselves to be guided by the Holy Spirit, allowing the Holy Spirit to work in us. I have never witnessed, heard about, saw with my own eyes a good thing following upon any sophist that says this. I'm just going to listen to the Holy Spirit. That means they're going to change stuff. So this is bad. The African bishops saved through their popular orthodoxy. The 2014-2015 synod, of course, they couldn't save communion for the divorced and civilly remarried, which came out in April 2016, because that part was set. Casper had been trying that for 30 years, and they were going to get that done. The Sankt Gallen Mafia had already set that. It was probably a written document, that part of the document, Amoris Laetitia, before the synod even happened. But they did save the woman and Father James Martin type stuff from happening then. It doesn't sound like there's going to be any muscular Orthodox African bishops that stand up and say, no, we'll see. No room for distraction means they believe this is the work of the Holy Spirit. Now, just a few days ago, on September the 19th, we got the official report that the new number 2 in the church, the doctrinal chief, Tucho Fernandez, of infamy, the author of this book, Heal Me With Your Mouth, about
Gross.
Frenching people.
Gross.
He said a couple months back, I have other books and they're just as bad. Or
Gross.
something like that. He joked that Heal Me With Your Mouth is typical of his other unknown books, but we conservatives have only gotten our sticky paws on that one. Gross. Gross. What a perv. This is the guy filling in Ratzinger's shoes. This very serious intellectual. I don't think he's the robo-uber conservative you guys all do, Ratzinger. But he was a serious intellect. This guy's sitting in those shoes in that office.
It's like asking a bum for financial advice.
Yeah, it is.
It's like,
it
hey
is.
guy, strung up on meth, laying in a gutter. Can
Yeah.
you tell me how you got to where you are today?
Yeah,
So I can
yeah.
follow that path?
You ask some horny perv to be in charge of Catholic moral theology now. But it was reported on 9/19, just a few days ago, that obviously he's now cardinal. This is not news. We knew he'd be made cardinal at the last consistory. He's already worked closely with Pope Francis in drawing up documents in the past. Ghost author on Francis's most important documents. Laudato Si, we think. And he worked closely with him on Amoris Laetitia. These are the two most important documents in the Francis pontificate. So we knew it was coming. I just hadn't heard of him for several years. He's been quiet since about 2019. Pope Francis appointed the 60-year-old Argentine archbishop, he likes Argentines, Victor Manuel Fernandez, call him Tucho, to the Cardinals Purple just days after appointing him prefect of the CDF. With this appointment within the Roman Curia, the pontiff brought to Rome a theologian who was very close to him. Now this is Aletheia, so they're trying to dignify the office. He's been ordained since 1986. He went to the Greg. He went to the Biblical Theology Institute at the Greg, right next to the Greg where I went to. He's worked closely with Francis for this whole time. The two Argentines continue to be close. Francis, right after his election, Francis appointed the rector and archbishop. He became an archbishop June 15, 2013. And then in 2014, Tucho published a book outlining Pope Francis's project, El Programa del Papa Francisco, Adonde nos quiere llevar, not yet available in English. That could be an important thing to read. I've never even heard of that. He had a tailor-made position at the DDF. So this guy is the doctrinal chief that will be overlooking this whole thing along with Francis. So two foxes in the hen house. It's all horrible. It's all horrible. The synod's in 9 days, people. There will be close synod coverage. I'll probably be doing as much as there are notifications. If journos can get in and get the info, I'll probably be doing daily updates on the synod. It's a big, big deal. There's nothing that will keep me from doing 5 or 6 shows a week during the synod, as long as we could get the info. But the journalists, as of right now, it looks like they won't even have the info. Holy cow. God be with us. The church is still the church. Stay strong. I'm glad to be back with you guys, parish orphans and retrogrades. Hobbit Day was 3 days ago. It's a beautiful thing. Hang with me. Become a low-level locals or subscribe star supporter today. Go do it right now. $5-10 a month. And we're beginning our fellowship reading. It's the white pill, reading Tolkien, who should be a saint. Reading Tolkien for the next 6 to 9 months during all the heinous, horrible stuff that's coming our way in late 23 and early 24. Stick with me for the synod. Deus Volt.